everybody. 1867 Sports Show back at you for another week. This is episode number Vladimir Guerrero Jr. tonight. That's right, my friends. We are at 27 episodes and wouldn't want to be anywhere else besides dealing with my man, Kyle Skinner. Kyle, what's going on, pal?
I am doing very well. It's been a week. I don't know if it's a full moon or something tonight, but there have been some interesting developments in my life over the last 48 hours.
There's a doings, a transpiring.
Yeah. But no, it's good. You got the biggest game in Canadian men's soccer history going on live as we record. So if we're mid argument about something and start bursting into Mexican broadcast team of go, you'll know something good happened there.
Yeah. Don't be surprised. But currently, Team Canada is down 1-0 against Argentina in their semifinal matchup of Copa America. But again, I was just talking to Kyle off air, and they look good. Honestly, they had one little mental lapse which led to the Argentinian goal. Can't fault them for it. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they're playing very well. They're controlling the ball. They're controlling the pace, and yeah, they've got a good handle on kind of how Argentina is attacking, which is good. Like they're stopping a lot of their high traffic, chances on net very early on. So one thing I will say though, can Canada's goalie please stay in your freaking net? You are not a forward. You're not a striker. You are a goalie. Stay in your crease for the love of God, because once again, he's out there running around like an idiot, and he almost gets scored on because the ball comes kicked back, and he almost get the same thing happened against Venezuela, and they kicked it over his head. Like, stay in your crease, man.
You need to have him on one of those retractable dog leashes there, where he gets too far from the net there, from the sidelines. Whoa, damn Ireland!
Oh, we got us a tuna. Look at this tuna. But honestly, they need to have him on like a shock collar as soon as he leaves his crease. Just zap him.
Fence, yeah. But yeah, no, it's been a competitive game for sure. And I mean, you look into the stands, I think the Canadian supporters are outnumbered about 1,000 to 1 right now. But the one bit of irony I have to say in this game is, especially after some of the South American countries were complaining about the state of some of the fields that they played in. Nothing like heading to good old MetLife Stadium for the premier spectacle, semifinals of the Copa America there. So whoever threw this tournament together, don't think they're going to be getting too much fan mail from the players after.
Yeah, and anyone who's watching the game, you could see that the drainage system on this turf field is absolutely horrific. Guys are sliding around everywhere. There's water spraying everywhere, which should not happen on field turf for people who aren't aware. Field turf is supposed to have a state-of-the-art drainage system underneath, which is why they have sand as one of the coats underneath. So the fact that, again, they've failed, whoever's organizing this tournament, to understand that MetLife Field and MetLife Stadium is the worst field turf in the whole world. Yeah. And yet they have the marquee games in the biggest soccer tournament in North America happening right now at MetLife Stadium. So yeah, I gotta give a stern, angry dad glance over to the schedule makers for that one, because honestly, that it still baffles me. I wanted to talk about it today, so glad you brought it up. But yeah, like from the opening, the opening couple of minutes of the game, I think one guy tried to go slide tackle, and he literally went out of the screen. It was like he's on a slip and slide. Yeah. Hilarious.
He hit a banana peel in Mario Kart and just kept going.
Maybe that's why the Canadian goalie is going outside of his net. He keeps slipping on the turf, and he's just like drifting
on a
away.
Frictionless surface there, just keeps going.
He's got bowling shoes on.
Yeah. The happiest person in the NFL this offseason is Saquon Barkley getting out of MetLife Stadium there for all those home games every single season. But yeah, we'll see if the boys can do it. But I mean, if you're going to try and put together like your Mount Rushmore of most important Canadian soccer games, men or women, this is now up there.
Yeah.
which, I mean, the fact that it's a semifinal, you can kind of make the arguments of like, shows you the state of the men's program over its history there.
Yeah.
But we're here now. And one of the underreported things, regardless of win or lose at this point, because they've advanced this far into the tournament, the prize money coming to the Canadian Men's Soccer Federation there is now in the millions of dollars. And for those who have been following along of the financials of Soccer Canada, could not be coming at a better time to have a nice run to the semis and get a nice little performance bonus check there.
Money is never a bad thing. And they say it's the root of all evil. But in this case, you're 100% correct. Any type of nickel or dime that they can get leading into the Olympics is well welcome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's just, take it for what it is. Team Canada men's soccer is in a very competitive game and controlling the play against the defending Copa and World Cup champion in Argentina. Mm-hmm. So you can't understate that fact that Canada has now kind of arrived on the scene. They just finished a World Cup in their own right. They're going to the Olympics. They've got another World Cup that's on the horizon in home territory. There's never been a better time for men's soccer in this country. And again, every second or third episode, we're always bringing something up about where things stand in the grand scheme of things in Canadian sport. And it's, it just kind of falls in suit with a lot of these other things that are happening. Regardless of how many buffoons have stood in the way of the progress of said sport, the sport just keeps progressing because there are more people playing the game. And when there's more people playing the game, Kyle, what more do you have to pick from?
Yeah, we got more dart throws at the board to hit the lottery, and look at us. All of a sudden, we've got a viable roster that can go out there and compete with the world's best. But it is a huge moment. So win, lose, or draw. Let's end with a little golf clap there for the Canadian men's national team. And I mean, you brought up the Olympics, so might as well segue into our next topic there, because the men's Canadian basketball team, who will also be traveling to Paris 2024 this summer, now knows who is in their group. And oh goody, they got the group of death here. So Canada is in Group A with Australia, which, for those who don't know, currently ranked 5th in the world.
Yeah,
so
very underrated program. Yeah,
NBA players galore. Canada, Greece, which making their first return there since 2008, happen to have Giannis on their team. So, no easy game there. And then Spain, who is always a international powerhouse there as well too. We'll deep dive them in a little bit, but just rounding out the groups, Group B, Brazil, France, Germany, Japan. So look at that. How everything worked out. The host
how the turntables.
Yeah, the host French team just get to cakewalk out of that group. And then Group C, Puerto Rico, Serbia, South Sudan, and the USA. So Canada is not going to have any easy games. On paper, they should still be the favorite to come out of this group. But looking at those other 3 teams in the group, who's the scariest kind of matchup that you think could be pretty frisky against our star-studded Canadian squad?
I think it's Greece, honestly, because name me a player on Team Canada that could match up with Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Well, we don't even know who our center is going to be now that Edie is out of the mix here. So yeah, it really could be. Take your pick of the poison there as far as, who is going to draw that unenvious assignment coverage.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the smart money's on Dylan Brooks, but Giannis has shown the skill level to just rise above every single big situation that he's come across in his career. When he was in the NBA championship, elevated his game. He was the best player in the world. Every time he's been in a big situation, he's showing up. Like he's a big game player. He just led a team in Greece who was an underdog team, but he led them to their first Olympics, much like Canada, for the first time in almost 20 years. Big moment for them. He's going to want to make a mark at the international level. And I think with all of the, it's the best way to put this. All of the flack that certain players are getting for abandoning their citizenship to go and play on super teams, I think you'll see a guy like Giannis, really kind of take off and shoulder the load here, saying, you know what, I could have gone and played for this team. I could have gone and played for that team. I'm playing with Greece. I started with Greece. This is where I want to make my mark. And yeah, I think he's really the type of guy who he can carry a team on his back. And Greece has predominantly been a scrappy team without Giannis.
Mm-hmm.
So you add that superstar player into the mix. That's a nightmare recipe for any team to match up with. But from looking at the other teams, I think Greece kind of poses that we can kind of sleep on them a little bit because their roster is not littered with a glutton of NBA players. But those are the teams that sneak up on you really quick. Spain, you know what you're getting. You know you're getting a well coached, a well balanced team that's played together for over 20 years in some cases, and and that they're just going to be there at all times, right? So yeah, again, I would say Spain, but everyone kind of assumes that Spain's going to be good. Greece really kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies going into the Olympics, knowing that they could turn it on at any point.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing with this team right now is with us not even knowing what the final roster really ends up being there, because there are still some question marks as far as, all right, who are those last couple
Yeah.
players going to be?
Thank you, Golden State and Memphis, by the way. You are now on our Stern Dad Glance look list.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it so much. But, looking at a team like Greece, I can already see how it plays out, because you look at that roster and it's like, all right, we know the one person who is circled in every highlighter in the drawer here as far as know where he is on the floor at all times. And you can kind of try and take that Raptors playbook of you build a wall in the paint and you kind of, take your lumps as far as outside shooting. But I just have this weird feeling in my stomach that it's going to be a very painful game to watch as a Canadian basketball fan, because you're so constantly worried about Giannis. But then there's going to be some random like George Papadopoulos or something like that all of a sudden starts just canning threes from the corner, and everyone north of the border here is going to be losing their mind. And it's going to end up coming down to some like, all right, we got a 1 point lead. There's 10 seconds left. And now we've got to get a stop on Giannis to advance. Like, I just see it being
Yeah.
ugly, rock fight of a game to try and get through. Whereas Spain, like you said, they're well coached. They're not to be taken lightly. Some of these guys have been playing, ball at multiple levels with each other since they were kids and learning to
Yeah.
dribble a basketball. But they're also not the Spains of old, where you kind of think of, Pau and Marc Gasol and, Fernandez and all of them just, going toe to toe with the Olympic dream team down there in the States. And
Yeah.
so they're definitely not the same juggernaut that they once were, but it's again another tough game. Australia is kind of that really frisky team who I think might have a chance of still actually coming out of this group stage, out
Yep.
of Group A here, simply
Yep.
because they've got a good blend of domestic players as well as NBA level talent. And so if you're to kind of take where Canada is right now and put them on a timeline, I think Australia is kind of on a similar trajectory, but they
Yep.
might be like one Olympic cycle behind, right?
Okay.
Give them 4 more years, and they might not have a full, 12-man roster of NBA players, but they are continually pumping out talent, and they're also becoming a viable domestic league with the
Very
NBL
true.
over there as well too. And once you've got those domestic leagues, we've seen how quickly all of a sudden the talent really starts to elevate. So
Yeah.
they're going to be an interesting team to watch, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, this is still Canada's group to lose. And you know what? You look at any of those games, not a single one of them is going to be the, all right, USA versus South Sudan. Is it a 70-point blowout that it's going to be? Like, there's not going to be that kind of game for Canada in Group A.
Yeah. So two things on that matter. So one, completely forgot who the other team was in that group. So I didn't even mention Australia because I forgot who you had mentioned was in their group. So yes, Australia definitely does pose a very big risk to Team Canada, and they do have a very well-rounded roster. So thank you for reminding me of who that was. So I might change my pick from Greece to Australia as well.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the kind of top-notch analysis you can only find on the 1867 Sports Show.
The thing is that I had I had a point in my head I wanted to get out about Giannis, and then I just completely forgot who the third team was.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
Well, you
we
should
got
have
there.
just pulled the Stephen A. Smith and just started going off on tangents and that have nothing to do with what we're talking
Yeah.
about, and then
Yeah.
start elevating your voice and start
Yeah.
yelling at the screen a whole bunch,
Yeah.
and then maybe it'll come across as, you know, I'm worth a $25 million a year broadcasting deal with ESPN.
And I honestly think that this is what these guys do, is that they just want to buy themselves time to remember what they wanted to say, and they just start going off in random topics. But anyways, we got there. We took the long road, but we got there.
Yeah.
And then two, very big kudos to you for thinking of a Greek name on the spot. But I will say, I knew your thought process as soon as you were saying it. So you went George, you're like, don't say Stroumboulopoulos, don't say Stroumboulopoulos. And you went Papadopoulos because you figured that's a very popular Greek name, while also being kind of a double entendre with a basketball term, right? Like popping a three. So
yeah, that was 100% my thought process there.
I'm just gonna say, kudos for you for not actually saying what I know your brain wanted to get out, which is Jordan Stroumboulopoulos. So,
yeah.
Again, fantastic point by you.
Yeah, shout out to former Much Music VJ for all of those that are listening. Early 2000s, late 90s icon in our teenage years. There.
He's a CBC and Much Music icon.
Yeah, there we go. But I mean, sticking with the basketball front here too. Now that all these signings that have been out for weeks now, right? But are now officially official, and the Raptors.
The old Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, daily tweet when they don't have anything to report. Officially official, something I reported 3 weeks ago. Like,
yeah. I am no longer pretty sure that this is going to happen. It's legitimately happening. But the Raptors have their press conference today to, formally announce the $400+ million that they're handing out to Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickley. At the same time, the Indiana Pacers are having their press conference with Pascal Siakam, and just some interesting kind of tidbits that came out from that. And the word selfish on the Raptors end and unselfish on the Pacers end got used more than a few times. So for those that were kind of reading between the lines, it was the Raptors were very much talking about culture reset and getting back to winning ways, and how last season wasn't up to snuff, and Masai was embarrassed about the performance, and this, that, the other. And the Pacers was very much, Pascal's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we love him as a human being, and we're not paying too much attention to anything else. So obviously a lot of locker room hijinks, we'll just say, we're going on. Maybe some clashing of personalities, but with this new young core, as far as Quickley, Scotty, RJ, Grady Dick, like what are your kind of takeaways from the direction that the Raptors are now heading into 2024-25?
I think that this is a good step, because when you look at the way that a lot of these guys are interacting with each other, you could tell that they're more tight-knit than I think the mishmash of the old regime and the new regime always were going to be. Mm-hmm. And I think you're at a point right now where you were, at the end of the Chris Bosh era, right? Where it was, okay, well, we got to reset some stuff. We're going to try and bring in, a new core. So now you get like a Kyle Lowry, a Rudy Gay, and trying to build around Andrea Bargnani. Like, you kind of had that, all right, we got some holdovers from the last regime, but we're going to bring in some fresh blood to kind of reinvigorate this team. And what you saw was a step forward, even though you're trading away the best player outside of Vince Carter that the franchise has ever had. But at the end of the day, this is necessary for growth. It's kind of like the old rainforest, analogy, right? Sometimes you got to burn it down to ash in order for it to grow back even more lush. Mm-hmm. And I think this is kind of what they had to do. When you had the old regime with, Fred VanVleet, Pascal, OG, and that group, Gary Trent Jr., and then you bring in some of these younger guys who they tried to, or, not even younger, but newer faces, like a Dennis Schroeder, and, people of that ilk. You could sense that there was always a disconnect between the group that was there kind of in the championship run and then the new group. And that really puts teams in the middle, right? Which is where the Raptors have been the last few years. They're kind of stuck in neutral. So do you want to run it back with those, savvy veterans that maybe only have 3 or 4 years left in the tank? Or you say we want to keep our window open for another 15 years and maybe just hit the reset button, get some assets back for what we can get them back for. We've talked about, whether, they're trading at an all-time high or trading at a low or whatever it may be. But this was absolutely necessary. And when I see guys like Quickly and RJ and Scotty Barnes, Brady Dick, like these guys are a tight-knit group already. And they haven't even had half a season together. Mm-hmm. So when I look at that, I have reason for optimism because of what I see off the court. When you saw on the court was actually pretty good in a small sample size, especially given the fact that we've never seen a season like this for the Raptors in history, with all the injuries, gambling suspensions, like everything under the sun that could have happened last year in a negative way probably happened with Toronto, outside of losing Scotty Barnes for another season with a ruptured Achilles or something like that.
That was a hand injury going up for a layup with a freak foot that came through there.
Yeah, exactly. So when you look at where they are going into this next season, they've got a very good young core who are all in the same age demographic, which is, I think, where you want to be. This is where teams like the Sacramento Kings were a couple years ago before they took that next step up. And now people are saying Sacramento is one of the favorites to win the West this year, right? So
if we weren't a Canadian show, I would have some thoughts on that. That's a whole episode in and of itself. But continue, kind
yeah. I mean, you can give your thoughts on it. I'm just saying, I've heard other people saying that Sacramento was one of the favorites to win the West. Not saying they're my favorite. I'm saying they are somebody's favorite. But when you look at where the Raptors are, again, this is much needed. I think that you got all you could have gotten with that core group together. The only asset that you didn't want to lose would be OG because of his youth, because he's still only 26 years old. But you got younger and you got two very valuable assets back with RJ Barrett and, Emmanuel Quickly. So I think where they are right now, they're in a very good spot. I think that the brass understood that given where they are, given kind of what they had in regards to draft compensation, they're really trying to bring in, and again, we talked about who they picked last week. You're really starting to see the type of personality that they want to have in that locker room. Guys who compete, guys who are kind of fun-loving guys off the court, but, dogs on the court, which is what you want. So to me, I think it's a positive. I like where they are. And, we'll see if there's any more tweaking, that's going to be happening in the next couple of months with the Bruce Brown contract kind of dangling out there right now.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said there needed to be kind of a culture reset, because very much, especially when you're watching these press conferences and you're picking up all the breadcrumbs of the stories that got leaked throughout the year. And, there's always these kind of tell-alls that always happen after guys get shipped out of town, where these journalists just kind of sit on these stories and here's my notes dump of why so-and-so got shipped out or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
I don't think it was that drastic in terms of the disconnect that there was between Pascal and OG and some of this new core, but there was clearly something there, right?
Yeah.
So as a GM, you need to essentially look at that and go, listen, what I've got here is not working. I can either go with the youth movement. Well, that's going to come at the cost of my established veterans, and we're probably going to take our lumps over the next season or two, and maybe we'll get to where we need to be, but it's not going to be this season. At best, this is probably a play-in tournament team here.
Yeah.
Or you say, you know what? We're going to stick with the guys that we've got. Some of these new guys, they've got some maturing to do. We're going to ship them out, and they can be someone else's kind of pet project. And obviously, in Toronto, they went with the youth movement. Now, will we know whether that was the right move or the wrong move till about 5 years from now? No. So there's no point kind of debating what we don't know is going to happen. But to put this in perspective, I think it was very much the same or a similar situation as what kind of transpired recently with your beloved Pittsburgh Steelers, where you've got this veteran group who is used to winning, is used to having deep playoff runs, is used to, as long as LeBron James wasn't in the East and always eliminating them, going and out there and competing every single season and winning a championship and all of
Yeah.
that. And then the new guys come in. And for those who don't follow them on social media, like Scotty Barnes, Twitch streamer, loves TikToks, the videos, the dances. Then they draft Grady Dick, who is arguably one of the biggest NCAA TikTok stars that there was at the time, right? And now you start bringing in all these rookies this year are already having TikTok dance offs with that same group of Scotty
Yeah.
and Grady and all of them. So it's a whole new era. And you can only imagine everything that, someone like Pascal Siakam has been throughout his entire life, being like,
Yeah.
what in the name of God is going on here with these kids? I don't really blame him for kind of
Yeah.
being like, you know what, this isn't my vibe, this isn't my crew, I can't connect with these guys, they're out on their own island.
Yeah.
Probably never would have. So someone had to go. You can debate the return that they got for him. We already have. Go back and watch the previous episode.
And while you're there, subscribe to the Dine Sports YouTube channel.
Like clockwork, Kirkwood is on it. But it was very similar to what happened with Juju Smith-Schuster, who very talented wide receiver, but there were some veterans on the Steelers who would have absolutely thrown him in a trunk and driven him to his new city, right, to get him out of that locker room.
Yeah.
So it was very much a fit thing. And I think, again, we won't know how it all plays out till a little bit further down the road, but it was something that needed to get done because, as you alluded to already, when you start bringing in more of a certain type of player and they're all in the same kind of age demographic, same interests, right? There's not too many of them that have families. Not too many of them are going home to put the kids to bed at night, right? So they are going to grow and mature together, and they're going to be a core that could be fairly scary down the road. But this season, you could tell me they're a play-in team, or you could tell me that they're hoping, the ping pong balls fall their way so that they can draft Cooper Flagg first overall next year. And I would probably believe you. So it was a culture fit, but you now see what that new culture is, especially after that press conference. And you see who were the 3 or 4 Raptors that showed up and sat in the stands to watch all of these contracts get handed out, and for Scotty and Emmanuel quickly to smile for the cameras and hold up their jerseys, and the future is now and it's a new era of Raptors basketball, and all those slogans get thrown around. It wasn't any of the established vets, and even Gary Trent Jr., who's not that long in the tooth himself, but doesn't really fit in with that core in terms of age and kind of skill set that he's bringing to the table. He's not even going to cost that much, but the Raptors are kind of lowballing him with the intent of, well, if you're going to sign for 15 million, that makes you a very tradable asset, right? And you kind of use maybe some mid-level exemptions and whatnot to manipulate something at the trade deadline, but you don't fit into our long-term plans. And he might even just walk outright this season. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do, but for better or worse, Masai is committed to the youth movement, and we're going to see what this young Raps core is all about.
Yeah. And, again, I applaud bold general managers and front offices who, again, don't just go with the status quo when it's not working. They tried it. They tried to run it back with the same group that won the NBA championship. It didn't work. They tried to keep a lot of these guys a little bit longer than they probably should have to try and run it back. It didn't work. 3 strikes and you're out. If you want to take a third stab with the same group that ultimately you haven't been able to find the same success with, what's the definition, of
word is insanity that you're
insanity. That's the word I was looking for. Man,
George Papadopoulos, famous insanity profiler.
I am on it tonight, but yes, what's the definition of insanity, Kyle?
Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Exactly. So where you see, the front office's mentality, I think, is a good thing, regardless of what you think of these players off the court, regardless of what you think of, their intention of, well, we don't really have any bigs to, insulate our, our athletic wings with. We don't have a lot of, bigs to insulate our talented point guards with. Look, it takes time to build a roster. anybody who's seen the documentary, the 30 for 30 documentary, this magic moment on the Orlando Magic and how they built their, their ultimate contender with Shaquille O'Neal, Penny Hardaway, it was a year by year process, and they essentially had to do it one player at a time. And in today's sport landscape and NBA landscape, you can get good really fast, or you can build something, right? Because you're seeing a lot of these teams who try and spend and spend and spend, and if it doesn't work for 1 year, gets blown up pretty quickly. We've seen that with all of the James Harden, Russell Westbrook's, Kevin Durant's, like all of their, mismatches of, oh, well, we're going to pair these three together in Brooklyn. Nope, that didn't work. We're going to pair these two together in Houston. Nope, that didn't work. We're going to put Paul George and Kawhi over in LA with the Clippers. Nope, that didn't work. And then you look at the state of where these teams are right now. No picks, over the cap, and they've got no secondary talent because they had to pay all these top guys so much money they couldn't build a roster. So you can look at it in that perspective to say, I would like my team to go all in and take that chance. Or you could say, take a long-term approach and build it right, and then you're there for a long time. Because you look at where the Golden State Warriors are. I mean, who knew that they were going to be as good as they were when they were building around Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green? I don't think anybody saw the success that they had right now. So I like it. I like it for a multitude of different reasons. And I hope that all of these very talented players continue to show the camaraderie and the ability to play with each other that they did last season in a very small sample size.
Yeah. Well, might as well stick with the Toronto sports scene here.
Let's do it.
Because don't know if you've noticed or not, but the corpse of George Springer has suddenly shown some flashes of life here.
And there may or may not be some trash can sounds in the distance in center field, but we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, well, my God, like the turnaround that has happened in the last 2 weeks, it's remarkable, because now you've actually got a viable player that you don't have to, reluctantly pencil into a lineup because he's making so much money and you don't have very many other internal options. So you just keep trotting him out there. But, it was painful to watch some of his at bats during, late May, mid June. And now you look at him, he's swinging the hottest bat in all of Major League Baseball. So the All-Star break is coming up. Immediately after that, you've kind of got a week and change until the trade deadline. Like, is now the time to try and sell at a high based on where the Jays are in the standings, based on, the cupboards are kind of bare in terms of prospects to call up over the next couple of years there. Do you try and sell the hot bat and ship George Springer out to a contender who says, hey, World Series champion, he has been in big moments, he's swinging a pretty good bat right now, veteran leadership, our clubhouse could use something like that? Or do you hold on to him and kind of hope that, all right, it was just early season, bump in the road, this is who we really think he is? And we know that Jays front office kind of marches to the beat of their own drum in terms of which analytics they pay attention to. But do you hold on to him and think, hey, and crazier things have happened, and although we look like absolute trash right now, we're still mathematically alive for a third wild card spot here. So you are in charge of the Jays franchise. Do you sell or hold?
I mean, in a perfect world, yes, absolutely, you sell. However, we live in an imperfect world. So
what?
you
mean Donald Trump and Joe Biden are not the two greatest candidates that we can trot out in a country of over 300 million?
Yeah, I mean, we'll leave North American politics aside for this particular segment, because oh boy, is that a can of worms. But anyways, the thing that always gets in the way are these pesky contracts, right? And you look at the cap number that George Springer carries, which is still over $20 million. That's a pretty big matzo ball sitting there, right? I don't know many teams that are willing to eat that level of contract that aren't named the LA Dodgers or the New York Yankees or the New York Mets. So realistically, what are you going to get back for a guy like George Springer, given the contract that he's got? Probably nothing. It's probably the vaunted player to be named later at this point. You're just getting rid of the contract. You probably have to eat a big portion of it just to do it, or trade one of your better prospects to get him off your books. I don't think that the Blue Jays are in a position to do that right now. So I think you're unfortunately stuck with him. However, he is a good clubhouse presence.
Mm-hmm.
He is a very, very likable person. He's very good in the media, very good in the community, and he just so happens to be playing very good baseball right now. It just has come at the expense of Dalton Varsho. So, I mean, if the Blue Jays, I mean, I think this is a recurring theme, and the record keeps spinning with the same thing over and over and over again. If the Blue Jays can eventually get it together and get all of these people playing at the same time, they can be a absolutely scary team. However,
And here
as I
comes the
mentioned,
matzo ball.
as I mentioned before, we live in an imperfect world, and you just have so many people playing bad baseball for too long of a time. Mm-hmm. And that's where you fall into these ruts of getting too far back in May, June, and July, where you can't make up the ground, even if you make an excellent run in August and September. Mm-hmm. Right? So yeah, I mean, I look at the Jays roster currently. I don't think that there's many movable assets, to be perfectly honest with you, given the status of people with contracts that are playing well and people with contracts that aren't playing well. You look at kind of where the pendulum kind of goes on each side. It's not good in either sense. The people with big contracts, they're the ones who you want to trade, but they're playing like garbage. The people with people with better contracts, they're playing really well for you. So you want to keep those guys on the roster. So yeah, it's one of these situations like we just mentioned with the Raptors, scenario of sometimes you push your chips to the middle and you don't come up with anything. And I think the Jays are kind of in that situation right now where it's like, oh boy, we put all of our chips in one big pot to try and get the biggest free agent in baseball history. We struck out, pardon the pun. And here we are. We're caught licking our wounds. We didn't have a backup plan, and it's showing. So, yeah, who knows? Are they going to hold on to a guy like Gausman? Maybe, maybe not. He's a very valuable commodity to anybody. Do you want to get rid of a pitcher with that type of pedigree? Then I don't think you do. However, if you want to restock those cupboards and kind of mail in the season, that's probably the first guy you look at. Second, you have to look at one of the big players that you've got on very, very movable contracts, which are Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette. Vlad Guerrero's starting to turn around, where he's on a little bit of a hot streak right now too. Just getting an all-star. He's I think he's hit 10 home runs in the last 2-3 weeks. So he's starting to turn his season around. He's also come out and said, I don't want to leave Toronto. I know it's a business, but this is where I want to be for my career. You're not hearing that coming out of Bo Bichette's mouth. No. So is this a scenario where it's like, all right, we've got a guy in Vladdy. We'll invest our money in him because we know what we've got in a guy like Guerrero, who's been very, say what you will about him. He's been fairly consistent since he came into the Blue Jays organization. A guy like Bo Bichette's been up and down. He's shown otherworldly, flashes of being an all-world shortstop. But now you're seeing kind of where the low end of the pendulum is for him. Not good. When he's cold,
Bob.
Yeah. When he's cold, he's cold. So I think those are really the two avenues that you can go down to really recoup any type of asset coming back. Other than that, you're going to have to do a lot of shrewd negotiating to even get anybody to sniff around some of these players that you've got at the trade deadline.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem right now, right? Is I think even the most rose-colored glasses of Blue Jays fan would say, you know what? This is probably a year where we are sellers at the deadline, right?
Yeah,
but there's not a ton of interest in the pieces that you actually want to sell. So that's why, honestly, I think this is a very interesting all-star break that's coming up for the simple reason that very rarely do all the teams have a break in the schedule, a break in
Hmm.
travel, and you usually get a whole lot of high-ranking officials all under one roof, right? Like the
Yep.
off-season general managers meetings and, all down in Florida or out on the West Coast, these kind of winter vacations that these GMs get together on, that's usually when you see the biggest trades end
Yeah.
up happening, right?
Yeah.
I think you need to explore every possible option. And if it is retaining salary, guess what? I am not going to lose any sleep over one of the biggest telecom giants in the world, right? Eating a couple million, right? Sorry, Rogers fans, your cell phone bills might go up a couple bucks over the next couple of years, but we're not talking about some tiny little company that, oh, it's the third generation of
Yeah.
owners and great grandpa bought this team for 500 bucks back in 1915, right? So I think this is a unique opportunity where, again, past this season, 2 more years, is this a contract going to age gracefully? Absolutely not. But could it become somebody else's problem? Maybe, right? And I'm not talking about going out there and getting a blue chip, right? Like ready for the major leagues in 2025 style prospect in return. It might be someone who is going to need another 2, 3 seasons in the minors, but has shown some brilliance. But at this point, you look at the Jays farm system, there's not a lot to get excited about right there, right?
Yeah.
We've already talked about Martinez and his suspension. We've talked about Tiedemann and all of his injuries that he has going on. You've kind of seen them try out a variety of players in these quick little, 10 game cups of coffee. They're up, they're down, they're all around. So the solution is not from within at this point.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the answer is tear everything down and ship out Gossman and Vlad and Bichette and I think it's going to be one of those teams where you need to move some parts, restock the cupboards, maybe take some lumps the rest of this season because even if you do catch fire and you make the wild card, you can't tell me that this team is not getting bounced in the first round with the way that they've played thus far this
Yeah.
season.
And you're
So
showing, yeah, and sorry, I'll let you continue in a second. Like they're showing the same ineptitude that they've shown the last three postseasons as well. So
mhm.
again, not a lot of reason for optimism, even if they do make the playoffs. But continue.
Exactly, right? So I think you need to explore adding some sweeteners to get Springer A off the books, but B, what can you get for him? Even if he is, the organization's 15th best prospect. Well, that's a prospect you didn't have before. And, get
Yeah.
him into the system and throw him into whatever down in Dunedin or throw him in Buffalo or wherever you need to stash him and just work with these kids for a little while because what you've got right now isn't working. It's broken. And it's a disservice to Jays fans to just sit there and go, you know what? We're going to stand pat because it's too tough to trade some of the players that we want to trade here.
Yeah.
Like something's got to give. And if not, it's going to be a very long 2024-25 stretch for Toronto sports fans in general, right?
Yeah.
Because the Jays are going nowhere in a hurry, right? We already said the Raptors are kind of a play-in team at best. Who knows what's happening in Leafs lands? Like even some of their most ardent supporters, as far as we've got all the superstars, we just haven't gotten the bounces. Like Steve Dangle's going out there and being like, trade Mitch Marner. I don't care. We've seen this story before. It's not working. So like things are starting to sour in Toronto. And as a Sens fan, kind of love the Leafs part of it, but for the rest of the part, just all roads kind of do lead to Toronto sports wise, just because they're the biggest
Yeah.
media market, and whether you like it or not, it's just the fact of how the media kind of covers the sports
Yeah.
landscape in this country. It could be pretty ugly unless some changes get made.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say on it, sent you a little text earlier, little tidbit coming out of Miami today that Mr. Jazz Chisholm is available for trade. So
Whom you previously identified as a possible trade target several episodes ago.
he would fill and check a lot of boxes for a very, very struggling Toronto offense. So just saying,
He's an exciting player, but did you see the players poll that came out as well
yeah,
too?
Yeah.
He is, according to his peers, the most overrated player in Major League Baseball, which Kirkwood is not paying attention to any of these unofficial polls in any way, shape, or form.
Listen, he might be overrated because he got a big contract in Miami,
Mhm.
right? Like people could have said that Christian Yelich was overrated, and then he got traded to Milwaukee, and you see what he's done there. He's won an MVP. Marcelo Zuna, had a career resurgence with St. Louis when he left the Marlins, and then obviously he's still playing at a very high level with Atlanta. We wanted to get into Giancarlo Stanton because obviously he put up otherworldly numbers in Miami. People said, "Oh well, he's only swinging, he's only getting those at bats because he's the only person that they have." So people are always going to say things about small markets where they don't really invest a lot of time. And I mean, yes, this is his peers that are voting him this. Whatever. I don't read into that much. If you're getting paid and you're saying that I'm part of the Toronto executive, that's something that I have to explore because he's still young. He's at a very, affordable contract. And I think that with all the whiffs that you've done with trying to lure some of these big name free agents, it ain't working. So just trade for one.
You're quickly turning into that viral meme of you leave Brittany alone. You leave Jazz Chisholm alone.
You leave Jazz alone. Serious.
I mean it. Oh my goodness. Well, let's flip from outright joy to disappointment on the part of one of the Calgary Flames and one of the biggest pieces of the ill-fated, I guess, on Calgary's end, Matthew Tkachuk trade there. And that's Jonathan Huberdeau, who spent pretty much a decade down in South Florida, never won the cup, and recently came out and kind of said, he's happy for his teammates, but it was also very painful for him to watch them ultimately hoist Lord Stanley's mug without him. And so that kind of got us thinking as far as Canadian athletes, regardless of sport here, who are some of the ones that really stick out in your mind that if you could rewrite history, you would have loved to have seen them win just one championship? So they can't have won three others, and it's like, I really wish Timmy got the fourth there. Now, we're talking about the lovable losers north of the border who you would have loved to have seen win it all. So who is atop of your list there?
Yeah, I'll talk about one who's still currently active, Joey Votto. I think that
he's in a little bit of trouble to do that this year.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you look at kind of the personality that he has, the level of success that he had in a very, off-beaten, team with the Cincinnati Reds. People didn't really know a lot about him. Former MVP, batting champion, put up, I think he's one of the top three hitters in Reds history. And if you know the history of the Cincinnati Reds, they've been around for a long time, and they had a very big string of success in the 70s and 80s. So the fact that he was able to do what he did from an individual level, I think, is so impressive. And I think that he's just one of those people where you just root for, you want to see win, and just has never had the opportunity to. I don't even think did he even make the playoffs in his time in Cincinnati?
I believe once. So. Yeah,
maybe once or twice.
The Reds were very streaky, but they cobbled together a few seasons there where they were frisky. It didn't go very deep, but he dabbled. He dabbled.
But Joey Votto is definitely my on the top of my list for people that you want to see win a championship before they hang it up, for sure.
Yeah. I had two on my list there, and both of them are currently retired, so unfortunately will not be adding to their resume anytime soon there. The first one is Paul Kariya, because as a young Canadian whippersnapper playing hockey, he was my favorite player growing up.
He was so good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they had me hook, line, and sinker, obviously living in Ottawa, Sens fan, but the Anaheim Ducks were also my co-favorite for a very long period of time. And now I'm just too old to watch, 10:30 p.m. puck drop. So it's Ottawa all the way. So they've kind of fallen by the wayside. But 2003 against the New Jersey Devils as a 7th seed, going all the way to Game 7 against the vaunted Martin Brodeur and Scott Stevens, who, again, off the floor onto the scoreboard, Paul Kariya going and scoring in Game 6. Like,
And you can't tell me he did not have a concussion when he
Oh,
came back and scored.
he was 1000% out on the ice. You can actually see it if you rewatch the clip.
Yep.
He is out and not even breathing for a couple seconds there, and then you see the kind of breath like
Yeah.
fog go onto his visor when he comes back to life, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, like not seeing him win the cup, not only because he was such a great player, but also because of how his career ultimately ended, right? Like, again, the Stevens hit was a no small part of what ultimately cost him his career, but then also taking a blatant cheap shot cross check to the head that really did it in several seasons later.
Yeah.
He was very much a amazing player who never really got the recognition that he deserved because he was playing on so many bad Anaheim Ducks teams back in the day. And so he was one that I would have loved to have seen it win it, not only because of him as a player, but because of that whole story of the Ducks that season, right? The seventh seed coming in and Giguère's throwing them on his back, and no one expected them to be. It just had every kind of, Hollywood-esque, all right, this would never happen in real life sports movie moment you could think
Yeah.
of, except for the fact that in game 7 they ended up losing.
Yeah. No, that's a great pick. I love Paul Correa. And I think anybody who was watching hockey at that time really didn't appreciate how good he actually was, especially rolling with Teemu Solani.
Oh, yeah.
Those two were just absolute electricity together. So that was a great pick by you. Um,
If
you
he
know,
was playing in today's
oh,
NHL with none of the clutching, grabbing,
200 points.
holding, yeah, it
Like,
would be unbelievable. He was one that was born in the wrong era for sure.
yes, 100%. And, speaking of a talent that was born in the wrong era, because I think if they were playing in today's game, they would absolutely dominate even more than they did when they were at their peak. Steve Nash is obviously a huge one for any Canadian.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that he didn't win a NBA championship is so disheartening for any basketball fan because one, he was a magician on the court. Two, the teams that he played with were so fun to watch. When you think about when he was with Dallas, he had Dirk Nowitzki and Michael Finley. That trio was just unbelievable. Then he goes to Phoenix for a second tour of duty there. And name me a funner, exciting offense to watch than the run and gun Mike D'Antoni, Phoenix Suns with Murray Stoudemire, Joe Johnson, Quentin Richardson, and the aforementioned Steve Nash. Like you
No
can't.
love for Marion there, eh?
You know what? I like Sean Marion, and it is what it is. He won a championship; those other guys did. But when you look at kind of what he brought to the game, two-time MVP, people will say, "Wow, the 1 year Shaq should have won that." It's like, yeah, he probably should have, but he didn't. So the fact that Steve Nash kind of carried Canadian basketball as far as he did, while also carrying a lot of these franchises as far as he did, Phoenix has always ran into one of these buzzsaw teams in the West that were just playing at an all-time high, whether it be the Spurs or the Lakers. It's impossible to put yourself in a worse position than playing against one of these juggernaut teams, right?
Not to mention
You
you got
put
Robert Horry hip checking you into the Spurs table there, and
breaking your face,
yeah,
and yeah, but how sweet would it have been to see Steve Nash again, like signed a late in his career contract with the Lakers? If he were to go there and they could have pulled out one of those miraculous, like Kobe led NBA championship runs with Dwight Howard and Lamar Odom and that whole crew that they had there too. So yeah, that was definitely one for me that I would have loved to have seen hoist a championship trophy, but alas, did not.
alas. Well, he was my second one there for sure. And I mean, for all the reasons you just said there, but also just because of, what he did for the growth of the sport in
Yeah.
Canada, right? Like you would be hard pressed to find Americans who could name you a single Canadian basketball player pre Steve Nash. And there
Mm-hmm.
were. right? Like,
Leo Rodens was a hell of a ball player.
yeah. Well, Rick Fox was winning championships with
He
the
was winning
Lakers,
lots of
and
championships.
yeah, and most people wouldn't have even right been able to pick him out of a police lineup. So it's very much the fact that all of a sudden Steve Nash got eyeballs up north, and we've covered it at length here. Some of these ragtag groups that he was playing with on the international scene there, where it's kind of, the U Sport All Stars plus the reigning NBA MVP. So it's, no small feat that everything that he was able to do and accomplish, and he would have been one that you would have absolutely loved to have kind of gotten that Ray Bork moment. And I think he
Yeah.
thought he was maybe going to get it when he went out to LA and joined his, kind of blood feud rivals in the Los Angeles Lakers. But yeah, the Dwight Howard, Steve Nash to the West Coast experiment went up in flames pretty quickly there.
Yeah, for sure. And I've got another fun one. If you don't have, a third one in your holster.
Well, I had a third one there, but I mean, it's a pretty obvious one in terms of how nice would it have been to see Christine Sinclair win a World Cup.
Oh,
That
yeah.
that would have been, chef's kiss right there. But at the end of the day, I had her kind of penciled in because at least she got a few Olympic medals along the
Yes.
way there. So it's not like she was completely shut out. So she has a little asterisk next to her name, but didn't win the biggest one of them all.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And I mean, like I said, she did have the taste of champagne, during her career, which is
Mhm.
something that a lot of people can. This one's a fun one, and I thought about this one when you originally posed the topic. One of my favorite players to watch growing up is hockey player, and kind of the anti Paul Correa, right?
Scott
I'm talking
Stevens.
no, I'm talking about Wendell Clark.
Ah,
Wendell Clark was one of the funnest hockey players to watch for a completely different reason than Paul Correa was fun to watch. Because you think about who embodied what a Canadian hockey player was all about. Wendell freaking Clark was exactly who that was. The guy could skate, he could hit like a freight train, he was tough as all hell, he fought anybody, and he was scoring 30 goals a year and kind of carrying the Toronto Maple Leafs until they got Doug Gilmour and Dave Anderchuk and those guys for their run in the 90s. Wendell Clark, unfortunately, again, you play that type of style, your body starts to break down on you, and didn't really have as long of a career as he probably should have had. And again, you think about a guy having that Ray Bork moment, would have been a perfect candidate to have that, whether it be with a team like Toronto or, again, a late season trade where he goes to a team like a Colorado or New Jersey or a Dallas at that time and wins one late in the 90s or early in the 2000s. So Wendell Clark was definitely on the top of, one of the top names on my list because he was just such a competitor. And I think he gets lost in the shuffle a little bit when you talk about great hockey players in that time frame because, again, he wasn't the 100-point goal scorer, right? He was the secondary scorer who ultimately carried the team with his leadership and his toughness. So, yeah, would have loved to see Wendell take one home for sure.
yeah. Wendell Clark had more facial hair as a teenager than I think I have ever had in my entire life. He was a grown ass man playing amongst boys. You go back and you look at his rookie cards and all that, you're like, that is
Yeah.
a 37-year-old bus driver right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Those Saskatchewan boys are built differently.
Yeah.
And it shows when you see guys like Gordie Howe and, Wendell Clark. And it's like, yeah, those are teenagers and they look like they've been working in the sawmill for 20 years.
Yeah.
But
They've seen some stuff.
they've seen some things. But yeah, Wendell was one. And then I got to give a shout out and a honorable mention to a former Sudbury Wolf and friend of my dad's actually, but Dale Hunter. There's another good one. Again, not a lot of people know this, but signed with the Colorado Avalanche to end his career. And that was the season before Ray Bork won the cup. Because people forget, Ray Bork was there for a second season, and that's when he won with the Colorado Avalanche. Dale Hunter did the same thing. They traded for Hunter and Ray Bork, and unfortunately, Dale retired, and Ray stuck it out. So, Would have been nice to
He's done
see.
all right in retirement as far as
Yes.
front office coaching, GMing, all of that, though.
That's
So
why I'm saying honorable mention,
yeah,
because like I said, he's had enough success outside of playing that I think he's done okay. But again, would be remiss if I didn't mention, phenomenal hockey player in his own right for Quebec and Washington. Just an unbelievable test, as well as very, very hard nosed player when it comes to two-way hockey for sure.
yeah, yeah. Before we head out here, I'll give a last little golf clap and tip of the cap to Jerome McGinley as well too.
Oh, that's,
There,
and
there,
you know
there,
what?
I'm gonna slide
Perfect.
one more in under
Yeah.
the buzzer there. You like how I did
Yeah.
that?
That was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about him, because you just think of, he won a gold medal, right?
Yeah.
With the Canadian Olympic team. But yeah, another great name that just didn't get to taste the Stanley Cup, even though he probably should have, based on, the conversation we had with teams that should have won from a Canadian perspective. But yeah, Jerome is definitely at the top of the, should have won list. And let's hope his son can, beat his old man with cup wins.